Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I was wandering out by the door there, and some gentleman asked one of the ushers, and he said, is the lecture on first? And the young chap said yes, and he said, I'll be back a little later. I think that was a very good start. I'm a professor. The definition of a professor is someone who has the bad manners to speak in somebody else's sleep. So I'm hopeful that standing between you and the entertainment, that I don't bore you for too long. But we're all in for a treat today. I've seen this movie almost when it came out, I believe, and I've seen it twice since then, and boy, does it hold up. It's great. You're in for a lot of fun, so you're going to have to put up with me for 5 or 10 minutes just to get to the entertainment. When I was asked, I just wanted to say thank you to the Enzian folks here. Are very kind and allow me to speak today about maybe some of the things I do and some of how they relate to what Roger Corman put on film. I got to believe that one of the things that I owe the Enzian is I came back to look at Roger Corman's or some of his work. I didn't even know I was looking at some of his work sometimes. I mean, it's just wonderful to see. And in the same way that they talk about life being about renewing itself and constantly trying to find new and interesting things, being able to rediscover something like this was just great. So I wanted to thank the Enzian folks for giving me the chance to do this. The first thing to say about X, the man with X-ray eyes, is simple. The premise holds up. Okay, some movies collapse even before they're released. I mean, they're just flawed, pretty rubbish and useless. But this one isn't. I put this alongside something like Forbidden Planet for holding up. And the premise, without being a spoiler, because you know it's called The Man with X-ray Eyes, is about how you expand, in this case, the way human beings can see the world and what they then can see with it. And Corman does so much with that premise, and I really enjoy lots of things. He's sometimes he's tongue-in-cheek, sometimes he's very serious, but he's constantly pushing you and making you think, even though it's often referred to as B movies. I don't like the epithet myself, but I don't think they're B movies. I just think they're interesting movies. And so our leading actor today is Ray Milland. Ray is certainly, I wouldn't say he's quite Hollywood royalty, but he's certainly among sort of Prince Harry level of Hollywood. He, for example, he starred alongside Gary Cooper in Beau Geste. I think he was the younger brother, and he had won an Academy Award for Lost Weekend some 18 years before the movie we're going to see today. So this is no second-class actor. And one thing you really appreciate, and again, it's no spoiler alert because you're going to see the whole thing, he plays it straight down the middle. In England, we would say he plays everything with a straight bat. There's no fourth, fifth, nth wall that we're talking about here. He is the character, and he delivers. And it's very interesting. I don't know the dynamic of how the two came together, but boy, I'd have loved to have been there to understand why Milan signed up for this. So he did, and it's to our great and wonderful benefit. So we're going to see this. I want to set it in context. There's an old joke that goes, if you can remember the 60s, you weren't really there, right? Do you remember that one? Let's set up what movies were on at the time. I could actually hum theme tunes for you, and you should immediately know. I can see my audience there, so if I start off with dum ba bum 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 ba bum bum, everybody knows I mean James Bond, the first real James Bond. We won't go into the arcana of that, but the first Sean Connery James Bond, which was Dr. No, released 1973. Let's try this next one. Let's try this one. Dum 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 da da dum dum. Dum 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 dum. Come on then, sing it up. Great Escape, Steve McQueen, 1963. Let's try this one. Hang on a second, see if I get the walk right. Da dum, da dum, da dum, da dum, da dum. Yeah, we're humming along with Henry Mancini. Pink Panther, 1963. Strange movie because Peter Sellers took over the movie, even though he had the smallest bit part, and went on to become the franchise. And let's try this one. I'm not very good at humming, but I'll have a try. Da 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 da. Yep, somebody got it in the back. Charade, 1963. All of these movies are released in the same year as the one that you're going to see. That's the set and the context. And some people, I'm sure here, because I've looked at a bit of grey hair, I've looked at the top of my head, for example, and 63 is a strange and interesting year for this country and a strange and interesting year for the world. It's the Beatles. It's the start of a change. It's the end of an era. It's around the time of our good friend, the Bay of Pigs, and it's the terrible assassination of John F. Kennedy, known November 22nd, 1963. This is the era we're talking about. And this movie reflects that era. It isn't modern in any sense, but there again, it isn't 40s or even a 50s movie in the way it's constructed. So again, even though this is entertainment, and when I get serious, my wife says, hey, get over it. It's just a movie, enjoy it. It also has such a lot to offer. Such a wonderful lot of things to offer here. For example, I wouldn't say this is even a cameo. That's the wrong way of describing it. There's a part for Don Rickles. No spoiler alert, you should already know there. And Rickles does very well in this movie. He's a precursor of a character called Crap Game in Kelly's Heroes. He plays the same thing. And you sort of got to look at it and you say, hey, Rickles is really good in this movie. I wonder why he didn't make more movies. There's some other things that are thrown up in the movie, and you can spot them as you go along. There's something called the third eye, all right, where we see our hero moving in parts of sort of a quasi Dante's Inferno, and you'll see him come out with a third eye. Well, if you look around carefully at the back of your dollar note, you see that as well. And if you look around very carefully at the logo to the Enzian Theatre Club, you see the same thing. We can construct all sorts of wonderful sort of conspiracy theories. I'm happy to do that all afternoon with everybody. But it's a representation, and it's literally an icon, and you see it here in this movie. So one of the great things about being a professor is that you just keep talking till everyone sort of passes out. And I've learned not to do that. I'm getting too old for such things. So what Joe told me we could do now is you can fire some questions at me, but I'll just give you a 1-minute potted history of some of the things I do. And so some of the things you might want to ask questions. One of the things I'm very interested in is perception, how people perceive things. I'll give you one of my own little quotes. The problem with seeing is seeing the problem. You wake up in the morning, you rub your eyes, a little bleary, of course. You might put on glasses, I do. But what's the problem? I see the world around me. There shouldn't be any problem. There isn't any question. Oh, yes, there is. Okay. The human visual system, and indeed visual systems of a lot of animals, is just a fabulous interchange and mishmash of all sorts of things going on at the same time. We're going to see some in the movie, but it is much, much more complicated and much more interesting. I can, as a psychologist, experimental psychologist, I can make you see things that aren't there. Oh yeah, I guarantee it. I can also get you not to see things that are there, to the point of you colliding with them. Ouch, that's going to hurt. All right. And why is that? Well, the fact is that the human visual system is probably sort of 98, 99% accurate, but it's the 1% that's going to catch you. And in the movie, what we're going to see is we're going to see the scientist. This is the classic trope, the scientist exploring out further and further, and then getting into some trouble with that exploration. And so I'm very interested in perception and the way it relates to the brain and how the brain then interprets what's coming in, as we're doing it right now. You're probably looking at me, maybe, I hope, touch wood. All right, I'm looking at you. We're processing a bunch of information, but boy, there's a lot that goes into it. And I've already explored that with you. And because I'm an experimental psychologist, I'm playing with you because that's fun for me. I've already referenced 1963 and I've seen the reactions we've got, and I've seen some of the reactions we don't have, because now I throw little test things out into the world. There's nothing more fun than playing with things, especially your children. It sort of screws them up after a while, but don't worry about it. There's more coming. All right, so Joe, over to you. And I gather there's a microphone at the back somewhere. Yep, we got a traveling microphone. So I would entertain any question you'd like to ask anyone. I really don't care. Don't ask me anything about secrets, but pass on. Stick your hand up. Well, there we got one there. Fire away.
Where is it? 3:30, guys.
You know what happens if the professor doesn't get questions?
So with this movie, would you touch a little bit on what visual effects were used at the time to make it?
Yeah, what a great question. I got the bad eye from Joe about no spoiler alerts. You can't do spoiler alerts, but let's look at Corman's problem here. Man with X-ray eyes. The art department has got to be wringing their head, right? Like, how do we now produce something on screen that indicates he's seeing more than we can see, even though we're sitting in the audience seeing it, and we can't see what he sees? So they try several things, and again, I don't think I'm stomping on any landmines. They try some through the back of the head, sort of like, imagine that you go through the back of this person's head and then see what they're going to see. By the way, there's a fabulously interesting piece of research. You won't believe this stuff. I mean, this gets on the edge of what was science fiction to science fact. There was an experiment, very interesting experiment, where a person wore a virtual reality set of glasses. And, as you wear VR, because you've got a little computer that can do that for you, you sort of see the world around you and you can create a virtual environment. In this case, we're creating a sort of two-dimensional virtual environment, but you create a three-dimensional virtual environment. And so what these scientists, I think they were from Switzerland, did was to take what's called the eye point, which is the eyes that you've got. Instead of putting it in the front of the head, they put it about 2 or 3 feet behind the back of the head, as you'll see in the movement in the film. And suddenly people started having these strange, weird, out-of-body experiences, because their point of focus, their point of consciousness, was actually now outside the head. And we can start to make those manipulations. That's really strange, isn't it? I mean, if you've ever seen Freaky Friday, that's all it is a transference. But I can put your eye anywhere. I can make it go anywhere in a virtual environment. Weird. So yes, they faced a very difficult problem. And as I said, one of the first things I said is this holds up. So watch very carefully when the art department, when Roger now has to try and face this problem, and he does it in several different ways. And I know it's easy to point and poke and always become the criticaster, but as my wife keeps saying, it's a film, get over it, it's entertainment. And I think they do it more than well enough. And I did reference Forbidden Planet, because if you remember the old the lasers on Forbidden Planet hitting the monster, that holds up. That holds up today. I don't need CGI. I've got little red dots going out at these guys. It's great. Okay, so yes, study that. How can we do that? Can we look at how people perceive? We do all the time. And we're particularly interested, I'm not, but some of my colleagues are, where people are not what you would call normal, where their brain is wired in such a way that their vision and audition, and sometimes vision and olfactory information, overlap in strange ways. And one of the books about it is called Blue is My Favorite Number, which is all about someone who transposes those. And the technical area is called synesthesia. Remember, if you want to be a professor, invent long words and confuse other people. Otherwise, you don't get paid more money. More questions, and Joe, you're in charge, because fire away.
Professor, not so much a question, but point of interest. Don Rickles, he was a graduate of the New York Academy of Dramatic Arts. He didn't get many opportunities to show his dramatic chops. This is one of the exceptions.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear it. I mean, Rickles is known as the sort of the king of the roasts and the snappy comeback. But I can't tell you what you get. I got the impression that there was someone who was at least deserving of more than this. And as I said, when he gets the role in Keller's Heroes, I'm pretty sure someone must have seen X, the Man with X-ray eyes, and said, here, why don't you just sort of somewhat reprise this? But you just get the impression that Rickles has more dimensions to him. But again, what is it? Thomas Gray, full many a flower of purest ray is serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bare, full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air. And maybe we see lots of people who just don't get the opportunity. And that's one of the tragedies of life. Fire away. One last question, Joe. Just one more, okay? Come on, ask the difficult ones. Oh, fire away, sir.
Is there a movie that you've seen that had sci-fi movie that you think had really good science?
Oh yeah. I mean, for example, The Martian was pretty good on almost everything. Not everything. I would not be sticking stuff in my thumb and hoping to sort of grab hold of Jessica. Sorry, I was going to say grab hold of Jessica Chastain, but I think if my wife wasn't here, I might want to grab hold of Jessica Chastain. We don't want to go too far down there. Yeah, there are lots, and there's a sort of a strange cycle involved as well, because it's not just one way. It's not just sort of, are the science fiction people sort of doing science? The science fiction people sometimes lead. So some of you may remember sort of fairly arcane, I don't even know if it was a movie or it was a TV series, Airwolf. And Airwolf was about a helicopter, and it was run by one single person. At the time, we had sort of things like Apache helicopters, which are a two-man ship. And then the military started saying, well, hang on a second, I saw it on Airwolf. Why can't we have one with just one man? So now you make it so, as Captain Picard would say, because I saw it on TV. And so you get that sort of looping effect. And there are some very, very good ones. My one sort of minor claim to fame is that I used to have a friendship with a chap called Sid Mead, who's somewhat known, especially for his work on the original Harrison Ford movie that I'm sure you remember. I probably don't. Blade Runner, I think you'll find I'm blocking on the original title. But Mead was very interested in science. He and I would sit during the break giving lectures. He would give one, I would give one. And he would say, well, what do you think of this? Is that reasonable? Or is that not reasonable? Are we just pushing it too far? So yeah, you sometimes do get people doing that. I wish they did it a lot more with history. History really teased me off on movies because it doesn't take anything to get it right. I mean, never mind. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. Anyway, the point is that you didn't come here to be bored by me. You came here to be excited by X, the Man with X-ray eyes.